I'll never turn, I'll never bend. I'm with you now until the end.
Good evening. Welcome to Conspiracy Cafe. I'm your host, George Freund. We're with you now. We're with you to the end. We always hope the end will be a long, 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 long way off. And we'll do our best to make sure that happens. You can do your best by making sure that happens too, by helping keep us afloat. There is a donate button on our website. There's a donate button around thatchannel.com. Do send a few shekels our way once in a blue moon. It does help assuage the costs, because the costs will be very, very big if we fail. If we fail, the costs will be complete and total financial collapse, maybe picking little ants out of the anthill for dinner. Pass the Grey Poupon, I'll have my little ant. Maybe fighting off hordes of hairy invaders, surviving thermonuclear war, all the good things in life. And you can forestall that by making sure there's an alternative voice that isn't a CIA informant, or an FBI informant, or a COINTELPRO operation, or a whole bunch of other things. That's why we have to come here, because we're not. That's why we have to do it ourselves, because we're not. One gentleman who is not anymore, many of you may know, was Jason Todd Ready, a fellow that we showed a video about in one of these Occupy protests. We did it more as a mute point of humor, because they were there all dressed up in camo with M16s, or actually AR-15s, because they can't have fully automatic AR or M16s probably in that state. And the guy presented himself off very, very nicely, and informed the photographer about the Constitution and rights and what we the people really means and stands for. And the professional paid law enforcement kind of filtered to the back and got out of their way. It usually does clear a room out when you got 5 or 6 guys, big burly chaps walking in with firepower like that, knowing how to use them. Unfortunately, Jason Todd Ready was most likely assassinated, murdered, with his whole family. It's turning into quite a bowl of conspiracy, as we term the phrase here at Conspiracy Cafe, because we know behind the scenes, behind the veiled curtain, there's always something going on. Has to be. Never lets us down. Can we show the video a little bit of the Occupy Phoenix, and we'll just get a refresher on Jason Todd Ready and what he was like and what they've turned him into in the propaganda war.
So you are with the Border Patrol?
USBorderGuard.com. We're totally privately funded. All volunteers.
Really? I thought you were, the badge looked like it was, you were a part of the government or something.
Well, all the citizens are part of the government.
I understand.
They work for us.
No, I understand. Yeah, they're the public servants.
I know what you're saying.
These are the public servants right here. Public servants, the people. Public servants, people. And so your organization is called what?
USBorderGuard.com.
Okay, and
has all the information.
Can you tell me your name, or is that, or your
Sure.
handle or something? Or
you know what? I'm the patrol leader of it.
Okay. Well, I'm Morpheus. So
okay.
what's your handle?
JT.
JT. Cool.
Yeah.
And so, what is your
main stance today?
Yes. Yes.
Well, we're exercising our Second Amendment right.
I love it.
Everybody can have a First Amendment right. So what we want to drive home today is that regardless of different beliefs, that the moment we give up our Second Amendment right, that's when tyrants can come in. That's when the big boys with guns can sweep through and take anybody's rights away.
Right.
So that's why we're standing out here today. That's our primary focus. The secondary focus is that there's 60,000 dead in northern Mexico from guns that our government provided, from training to the Los Zetas from our government, which also includes Los Zetas. So why is that? So we're calling attention to that as well. We're having Americans killed and Mexicans killed. We really should be working with our neighbors, not against them.
Right.
So that's our second focus, because that's what we do every day.
Okay.
But our main focus out here is because we want to exercise those rights.
Right, and we have to be protected against the public servants.
That's why we're facing this way, except for we got security guys.
Right, I love it. I think this is awesome, man. You guys really rock, man.
We put our back to everybody back here because we're trusting everybody behind us to be peaceful. Doesn't matter. We agree or disagree.
Right.
That's what our rights are about.
So
We're not Wall Street bankers, let's put it that way.
What, are you prepared to do anything here today?
That's what we're trained for.
Okay.
So everybody out here is part of a squad that's fully trained to use justified use of deadly force. That's important to know. We're not cowboys out here causing a problem.
I understand.
As you can see, it's all peaceful.
Okay, it gives us an idea of our memories of Jason Todd Ready. That was we played that whole video in total on a previous show when Occupy was in Phoenix. I was very impressed with this young man. He's 39 years old. There's a lot of gunk coming out about him now, about, you know, the media just gets in him right away. They describe him, you know, right away as a white supremacist and such like that. I don't think that was the case, really. It turns out he was an FBI informant. That seems to be one of the most common jobs a person can get nowadays. And the slowing economy in the United States is you have to be a rat of some sort or another. That adds a little mystery to the mix. But seemingly, someone entered his home, killed his 47-year-old girlfriend, Lisa Lynn Medeiros, a homemaker, her 23-year-old daughter, Amber Medeiros, who was an employee of Wendy's, and her child, a 16-month-old toddler. That really adds a really heinous mix to this. And then her boyfriend was a former soldier from the war in Afghanistan, 25 years old, Jim Heot. So it must have been a relatively ruthless type of event that you have a former soldier there, and then Mr. Ready was a former Marine, perhaps removed from the Marine Corps to become an informant or special operative with the U.S. government. Right away the local police said he did it. But what maybe everyone didn't know before was that there was a survivor. There was another young female who hid in the home and came out after it was all over, and she detailed that there were 2 cars of shooters that left the scene, and that Jason entered the property and was shot down by these intruders as he came in to try to rescue his family. Which makes pretty much good sense, because it would appear, regardless, that with his border guards unit, he was an American patriot who believed in we the people and was trying to do as much as he could to protect the southern border of the United States, which was being infiltrated at a great level from both sides, with the drug runners bringing narcotics into the United States and the American government sending weapons to the drug dealers with Operation Fast and Furious. Quite a pickle to be put in between a rock and a hard place. So no matter what you do, you're going to be despised by both sides, eliminated by both sides. It might even be a competition to see who can whack you. And whack you they did. The nature and severity of the attack almost makes it look like it was a narco attack, because they're just fundamentally ruthless. They do that sort of attack all the time, as we'll probably show you some pictures in a little while. But this is just absolutely horrendous that in a small town like Gilbert, Arizona, that we can have a death squad come in and wipe these people out and get away with the local police saying almost immediately that the perpetrator was the victim, Jason Todd Ready, who was, by the way, running for the office of sheriff in Pinal County, Arizona, where he resided, so that he could lawfully lead law enforcement against the drug dealers and the criminals smuggling weapons across the border, and maybe exercise some authority as the senior law enforcement official in that county to keep things like Fast and Furious under control. But as an FBI informant, who knows, maybe even the YouTube that we presented here may have been an FBI sting operation to try to get people to do something so that they can, arrest them and make it look like they're doing their jobs and that there's a threat that has to be dealt with. It's difficult to say. So what that opens in this investigation is, if he was an FBI informant and mingling around the Patriot type of philosophy and movement, maybe some of them didn't like the fact that he was on both sides of the fence and they took care of business. It's difficult to say. It does open a new part of the investigation. It may not have just been narco-terrorists. And narco-terrorists are, like he said in his video, they stopped counting at 50,000 deaths in the war on drugs. In Mexico, he quoted 60,000. I might find that to be a more accurate figure, because this war on drugs is killing people. This is just the insane banality of the whole concept of our leaders, that they're just so butt-fuck stupid, and pardon my French, but they are, and 60,000 people have paid with their lives, and those are the survivors. God only knows how many are wounded, and how many are totally psychologically scarred from this, because it's not just like your typical shooting, murdering, killing, or something like that. The degradation of the human body by these people is just absolutely amazing, and that only includes the bodies we've found. Who knows how many have not been found in very remote locations in Mexico or the southern United States. These are real living human beings. So to save your life or the life of some drug addict, we're going to kill 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100,000. If we get to 6 million, can we say it's a Holocaust? Innocent people who probably aren't doing drugs, who just get caught in the crossfire. How many law enforcement, like there was one mayor in one of these towns, he was shot to death on the first, or pardon me, not mayor, chief of police, he was shot to death on the first day of his job. He was one of the few they could sucker in to be chief. So what's the level of violence here? Well, let's look at these pictures here of the hangings. So this is what the drug dealers have done, and you'll notice the U.S. border is right here, the bottom left of the picture. So right basically in full plain view, aside from the wall, maybe they saw the guy, hey, look at those guys putting up some ladders and doing some work on the wall there, hey, pretty good stuff. No, they're hanging the bodies of these people, which include men and women, who were generally beaten and tortured to death and then hung. Suspended sentence here as the various drug gangs war. So we have the Zetas cartel fighting with the Sinaloa cartel, and then another one called the Gulf cartel, and they go back and forth and change sides and all this sort of thing. And this is what we do. Here's a close-up of these bodies. Dang, this is what free trade is going to do for you. When we open the border to have the North American Union, and you can go from end to end of this continent, this is what's going to come to your town, right? And they don't show the pictures of the 14 decapitated heads they found wrapped in plastic. No, they don't show you that. But that's Mexico. That's what you got to live in. That's what the war on drugs is all about. It's insane because you can't ban anything. It's against the laws of supply and demand. And these idiots who run our governments and run our countries are still foisting this bizarre notion. It's like you're going to pass a law against falling and repeal the law of gravity because it's not going to happen because you don't want it to happen because you can make money on something. No, it doesn't work. These are natural laws of the universe. Nothing can ever stop them from being natural laws of the universe. You can't pass any laws to take away the reaction between a supply and a demand curve. You can only drive up the price or lower the price. And the only way to eliminate narcotics trafficking, if that's what you want to do, is reduce the price to zero. Or as close to zero as you can get. Give the crap away. There's nothing for them to fight over anymore, except whatever spoils they may have taken previously. And then they're out of job. That's it. Government's giving it away for zero. How do I compete? Right? Buy my crack, it's $50. Oh, I can get it over there for zero. Supply and demand curve can work for you. You legalize drugs, you take organized crime out of the drug business. It stops virtually instantly. Just like Prohibition. It didn't work. It can't work because it defies the laws of supply and demand in economics. So as soon as they got rid of and repealed Prohibition, organized crime had to find something else to do. Shucks. And that saves a lot of people from what's going to come, because this isn't going to stop. This war on drugs, this is just insane. Like, it's not like a war on drugs, it's a war on your own people. It's a war on your own countrymen. So when you get some moron, some loser at the top saying, well, I'm going to wage war on drugs. No, you're not. You're waging war on your own citizens. You're going to kill them and destroy them and ruin their lives. Why? Because you want to help them. Is there a sanity test somewhere along the line? Then, of course, there's more information about Gareth Williams coming in now that this inquest is going on. So, same thing like we had with Mr. Ready. We had the smear campaign, an instant smear campaign, where information was leaked to imply that Gareth was a transvestite, that he's a homosexual, that he's participating in bizarre bondage rituals, in some kind of perverted sex game of some sort, and that's how he died. All this was disinformation. So this has been discovered by the police that there were leaks, and that none of the people who made these leaks are going to face any disciplinary action. So that can only mean one thing. They were following orders or doing something with the consent of their employers, their masters, their handlers. That's why they're not facing any disciplinary action, because they interfered with this investigation and forced lead investigators to go in the wrong direction, pursue false leads, and allow the killers to escape. Now, I think if I was the chief of police, I would say that those are grounds for dismissal, if not incarceration, for many long years. But then I guess I'm not a Freemason under the control of whatever hierarchy controls the police. So the lead investigator, Detective Chief Inspector Jackie Seebeyer, is leading the investigation and talked about these leaks. It's still hard to understand how he had 20,000 pounds worth of women's clothing. He must have had a lot of friends, or maybe he was just had that shopaholic syndrome. But they have to wonder here. They say, well, they wonder why they would release this material. I don't think it's a big wonder at all. I think one of the reasons is this was before the exposure of the hacking scandal, a really murder scandal of Murdoch Incorporated or Murder Incorporated. That this guy had control over the phones, over the intelligence, over the communications of virtually everyone. It is heating up a little bit because there are plans, hopefully, to get DNA samples from up to 50 intelligence officers to try to eliminate them from the close circle of suspects. The Williams family has criticized the Metropolitan Police and Counterterrorism Branch, SO-15, for total inadequacies, and I must agree. There's also allegations in another article that MI6 came into possession of another phone, an iPhone. So now this is where we really start peeling back the veneer to say, is Murdoch Murder Incorporated involved here? Because this second telephone had video images on it, allegedly of Gareth dancing in the nude in cowboy boots. The big problem is, as an MI6 officer, he's not supposed to take his own personal private phone into work because it's full of classified confidential information. So he would be facing a big slap on the wrist if he got caught bringing in this phone. The phone that was found in his apartment at the murder scene was cleared out, completely empty. So we have to wonder if the phone was cloned and the hacker mafia was collecting information off his phone or disseminating more information off his phone to other parties who may very well have been his killers. They also mentioned that he may have worked on the computer virus that disrupted Iran's nuclear program. Well, that's possible, or it could be another red herring to a degree. But one thing we were very concerned about was when he did go somewhere while he was supposed to be under close surveillance, he did go to Harrods, Mohammed Al Fayed's shopping store. Maybe to buy more women's clothes, or maybe to say, I got some scoop for you on who killed Diana. And then the WAC team comes out and takes you out. One of the other major stories that is just not making the circuit in mainstream media to any great degree, probably isn't making the talk show circuit or anything else, is just so important, like it should be like a 9 on the Richter scale under your ass. Russia's top military officer warned Thursday that Moscow would strike NATO missile defense sites in Eastern Europe before they were ready for action. With quotes, "A decision to use destructive force preemptively will be taken if the situation worsens," Russian Chief of General Staff Nikolai Makarov said at a meeting with all our beautiful globalists and wonderful one-worlders on this missile defense shield. So Mr. Obama says it's not a burning issue for him to bring this up. They'll wait until after the election. And I don't see how that's important, that this is a major election issue in the United States. It probably should be, but part of this whole concept of this missile defense is it is supposed to track an incoming missile from Iran, and Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon or a working warhead to put on a missile. So there's really nothing to protect yourself against. And the Russians are pretty damn sure this whole setup is there for them. And they have lots of missiles with nuclear warheads already installed, more than enough to pretty much vaporize Europe and a good part of the Western world, including Canada and the United States. So let me get this straight. To stand up against a rumor or a fraud, we're going to piss off somebody who has the second largest nuclear arsenal on the planet Earth, and have planned to develop that even further. We showed Medvedev on a video months ago talking to the Russian people, saying, point by point, this is like the Cuban Missile Crisis. You do this, we're going to do that. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. And it's just like he's declaring war. I don't think he's doing comedy at a nightclub. He was in the office. The flags were on each side of him. He's in a nice suit, laying it on the line. And somehow, this isn't news. So the BS they shoot us is that this system can't interfere with Russia's ballistic missiles. It's going to know the difference. So admittedly, maybe in the first stages they have it set up for slower moving missiles like Iran may have, as opposed to the intercontinental ballistic missiles that Russia has. But in the final stages, it will be able to deal with intercontinental ballistic missiles and be a threat to Russia. And Russia says flat out, through General Makarov, that we will respond. They're going to shoot you, you shit, which means us, because we're standing in the way. Then you're going to have to shoot them back. It's going to be like the nuclear winter thing, Dr. Strangelove. So the red line, fortunately, doesn't come for some period of time. This thing won't be completely up and running till 2018 if we live that long anyway. But as one of the diplomats figured out, this gives us an idea of just how strongly they feel about it. What part of it don't you understand? And we pay them. That's the bizarre thing. We actually pay them. These people get paid to do this, to be morons. I think it was the easiest thing in the world to, like it was Bush who did it. He started it all out. He started the Cold War all over again. Everything was kind of, lovey-dovey. You steal what you want, we steal what we want, everybody lives happily ever after. And now it's, we got to rub salt in your eyes for no reason at all and then put some sand in for good measure. What are you, fools? You could say, send him to Guantanamo for that. He laid all the groundwork to start World War III against a real enemy, not Iran, a mystical magic tour of total crap and propaganda. But that's okay. Everybody's on their knees shaking about Iran. How we fall for it. Like on our website, prohibition-cafe.com. Do go to the video section, because we found the BBC's Power of Nightmares. I'm just referring to it myself there. That's okay. And this is an absolute wonderful 3-part series talking about Al-Qaeda and saying completely and totally that it is a myth, it is a falsehood, it is a complete fraud. We'll get into that a little bit later in another article. But it's completely manufactured. Al-Qaeda is a code word for the fact we did it ourselves. And you want to give away more of your rights and freedoms to these monsters? You want to give them more power, more control, more money? Then, of course, we did have a Google Doodle to break the other day. It was a big one. It was a tough one. I was lucky that, somebody sent me a very important article that goes with it that I hadn't seen, because it was my day off and I wanted to rest a little bit. But, of course, when duty calls, it's climb into the old steno chair, get in front of the computer, and just start tapping away at the keys and see what you can find. Because the little piece of information, like there was no mistake at looking at the doodle. To me, I've read them for so long that I'm dealing with an attack, something nuclear, something prophetic. Same old, but this one put some hard and fast dotted I's and crossed T's. So according to an article by Gordon Duff, which is linked on our website in the article on the Google Doodle, a single nuclear weapon has gone missing as of last week. One of 4 missing nuclear weapons. That's going to be a party. And what do the Americans do? They find a guy with dirty underwear in Yemen. That's putting it at the top. So Thames Valley Police detained a high-ranking government security officer at the behest of what we were led to believe was the Home Secretary. This weapon was supposed to be a 500-kiloton hydrogen bomb, one of 4 being tracked. Was last seen being loaded at the German port of Bremerhaven in Germany. In a counter-terrorism surveillance operation, American NSA, British MI6, the Office of Naval Intelligence, and the Royal Navy are allegedly believed to have seen this weapon loaded onto a Dolphin-class submarine built in Germany and leaving the harbor at 7.5 knots. There is a country that buys those submarines. It's called Israel. It's also looking for a false flag event to start a major theater conflict with Iran. So to get your hands on a nuclear weapon and make it look like somebody else blew it up would be just the gravy and juice you're looking for to start this mess. As we've been saying for a long, long time. We even followed our Thor Liberty ship into Germany with the shell game of missiles and all that sort of rot. Maybe they even had more on board. So this police force is supposed to have arrested and confined for 12 hours a NATO intelligence officer with electronics surveillance gear. So we got to wonder, like, isn't that kind of important? Maybe he's tracking a nuclear weapon, right? The Olympics are coming up, and you guys throw him in the clink because your master, the Home Secretary, the spin doctor who does all the dirty work, tells you to. And you listen. So Germany was in a position after reuniting with the other half of Germany. They were supposed to have held 182 nuclear weapons and were supposed to give them all back to the United States in 2005. If possession of these weapons would put them in violation of the international treaties. Same ones we go after Iran for, same ones we don't go after Israel for. One of the possibilities the author talks about is that terrorists have stolen a nuclear weapon that Germany was holding illegally. Germany could be involved in a terror plot aimed at a third party, like Iran. Then he gets into some of the other things. The British government, at some level, some departments are aware of this action and are responding with retribution against their own intelligence services. Is that Gareth? retribution, put you in a body in a bag. So it says we have to take a long, hard look at David Cameron and his mysterious meetings with Rupert Murdoch, who was not very Australian, but ultra-nationalist, Likud Israeli, which is very true. If someone is planning to blow something up somewhere, the Bush administration might not have followed through on acquiring these weapons 7 years ago. Some of the other locations that this author talks about bombs being located at, which are very pertinent in this day and age, are inside of London itself. Are they going to hold the Olympics there? Other locations are likely New York, Lower Manhattan, with a weapon, he says, how he knows, I have no idea, tuned down to 100 kilotons to pass off as another plane crash. Oh, didn't they test the plane crash last week? Hey, you know, if we were connecting dots, we could almost get a line. Then they mentioned Mombasa and other African ports as well. And then one of those wooden stakes through the heart says here they have a specialized aircraft to track nuclear weapons. It's a Boeing Sentinel E-3D, a highly modified 707 aircraft. The British have 7 of these operating out of RAF Waddington. All of them have been placed on mechanical fault stand down on April the 14th. Now, what are the odds? 7 planes all at once are broken at a crucial time when the Olympics are going to start, when somebody's alleging that one of these nuclear weapons got loose. We know very well what the stand-down order means. It was given out quite a lot on September the 11th. So they said it should be relatively easy because it's anticipated this was a former Soviet Union weapon, and the nuclear signature should be very clear, especially with aircraft like that, to find it. So that added so much to this Google Doodle that it just blows me away, because it was a very challenging one. And when I read this, like I say in the article, it sent shivers down my timbers, because there's only one place where somebody breaks these things and looks at these things and sees what they mean, and that's here. We do it with ease, relative ease. Sometimes they're a little more complicated than others. It takes a great deal of concentration, where it's just sit down, fasten your seatbelt, look at this, understand basically the intelligence history of the world, the use of codes, how they work, and then try to piece it together. And I think we do a reasonably good job. This doodle was devoted to artist Keith Haring, who passed away in 1990. He made a genre of little dancing people in many forums. But this little guy here, the flying X-Man, immediately attracted my attention, because right away I'm thinking X marks the spot. X like a destruction, a target. The flying, something to imply with a weapon coming in from the air. And then the other part of the doodle at the top is these 3 figures coming out of each other. They reminded me of these little egg dolls the Russians make, the Matryoshka dolls that you can link to see what they are if you've never heard of them before. They're like little painted shell dolls. And it implies to me that they're playing the shell game. And what were we talking about? We have the link to the Thor Liberty article we wrote before about Thor Liberty carrying weapons, getting into a shell game, possibly transferring weapons from ship to ship, taking it to center stage in a conflict. The yellow figure in the dancing doodle looks like people in a circle celebrating with joy. Why? Because they're pulling this off. They're going to take us to the New World Order. They're going to blow us up and start this war that they want to start with all their heart. So they're elated and dancing in a circle. And they lie. because Israel's defense chief, as we reported on the last show, said Iran's made no decision about whether they're going to manufacture a nuclear weapon. It still isn't done yet. So the only way to really get a war started is we have to do something just way over the top. And then the shape of these guys in the shell game, can almost imply a blue color that we have Israel. We had the figures, the next couple of figures after the dancing couple have holes in them, look like they're wounded to some degree. And are those the victims of the attack after they deploy this weapon? They're blue too, so will they be Israeli victims? Something to really get it going. The green figure isn't human. It looks like some sort of predator of some sort. I just picked the dog of Hades out of my hat. And the last figure is a red image with something coming out of it, a shell bearing a heart. So I look at that red, the devil, Antichrist, bringing out the false peace. Because in a way, this is all Bible prophecy. There's no escaping that. The LA Times, the Toronto Star, many other forums mention this article with one particular piece of artwork he did called Crack is Whack, which is in New York City, one of the primary targets mentioned in the Bible code, but also mentioned in this previous article by Mr. Duff. You'll see this figure with skeleton with the X's for eyes. Looks like, something that's going to kill you, destroy you. You see the people in all sorts of, as they said in the movie Airplane, if you've ever watched that comedy, assume crash positions, and everybody just falls helter-skelter all over the place, as if they're reacting to some sort of explosion, attack. He's carrying something in his hand. The best thing I could use to describe it, because I don't know exactly what it is, was the vial of bitterness as described in Scripture. There's also, of course, the location of this in Manhattan. And one of the bizarre little anecdotes to this is Whitney Houston was interviewed in 2002 by Diane Sawyer. We have a YouTube link here where she talks about Crack is Whack, the same title. And then before this happened, she dies. So this is at 2nd Avenue, 127th Street, Harlem River Drive. His other famous work, Radiant Baby, doesn't leave too much to the imagination, especially if it's the glow-in-the-dark baby after a nuclear event. Then we have this figure. This didn't come with it or whatever. It's just one of the images I found of his, but his mind seemed to be on track where they're pulling someone out of a computer. And the cyber war that we're about to experience, the infiltration of various systems is very important. So he drew this mural, the 10 Commandments. It's rather vulgar, I guess, but it does show the X-Man, and he's doing nasty things to people. A lot of people are doing nasty things. They're being crushed and taken advantage of, but no one said he was a saint. But one of the cures here is, of course, we see this and in the other mural with the dollar going to zero, that there's going to be an economic collapse. But the way he's printed this one is, dollar, $0, SOS on the note. That could be very important. It's like a call for help. Maybe they killed him too. But he did a lot of references to like our X-Man, X-guy here. This X-Man series, there's a lot of like biblical, apocalyptic type shows recently. That could be very important as far as a storyline is concerned. And like I say, I'm the only one who reads the Google Doodles for what they are, and the Bible code did say someone with my name, friend, can delay what's going to happen, because I have a very unique skill that no one else seems to be able to make use of, or to even understand to a great deal. It is very upsetting, because for me it's child's play. I read this like, you would read almost anything in your newspapers or magazines and all this. To me, this is very, very simple stuff. But unfortunately, I'm the only one who's doing it to a great extent. And if I could do it to a broader audience, we could delay or forestall from this generation what we have to go through, because we can expose the evil, tell it what it is to the common folk. And even if they don't do like our St. George here on the screen, you don't have to pick up the big lance and charge at the demons. But just by knowing them, understanding them, and dealing with them, We can deal with them at the ballot box. We can just shun them into non-existence, completely ignore them for what they are. Because for what they are is demons. Horrible demons. And one day we may find out. One of the targets, of course, this chap talked about was London. And then, of course, what do we see here? You know, poison drones carrying biological weapon are the new Olympic threat, warns colonel in charge of keeping London calm. Well, that would keep me really calm. Oh yeah, we're going to have a biological threat. We're going to put, you know, these missiles all over town to shoot down aircraft, and we got drones flying all over. We got anti-aircraft batteries all over town. We're ready for it, baby. Lock and load. Look what we got here. They even tell them, see, in case you're stupid, this part's the top. You don't want to hold it backwards, eh? Or upside down. Whoa! Who launched that missile? But these boys are ready. And we have to wonder, is it over the top? Or do they know something we don't? SAS troops have anthrax emergency training. So at one point they say a poison drone, and they're taking this anthrax training. And then where are they taking this anthrax training? See, that's why you have to read these articles in great detail, because sometimes there's one or two important keywords that break open the whole story. And of course, the whole story is they're being trained at Porton Down. And who was murdered from Porton Down last week? Well, go to Conspiracy-Cafe and look at the Porton Down trail walks. They'll tell you. Is that why they killed this man? Because he knew what they were going to do in London? It's like they said in the previous article too, when we implied about Gareth being killed, is that they're going to exercise extreme prejudice in silencing these people. So it says the British military forces and the police in London are prepared for everything. And you got to worry about people that are prepared for everything, because maybe they're not prepared for everything because they have a very limited field of knowledge. One thing I can assure you they're not prepared for. They're not prepared for a false flag nuclear event and a secret stand-down order. So we've already verified that they've put out a stand-down order on planes that detect nuclear weapons at the most crucial time you would need them. And the false flag, I think, may be very, very clearly flying over London for these Olympics. And there's really not a whole lot you're going to be able to do about it unless you have knowledge. So then another story that just shows you how they're setting the stage. Worker smuggles fake bomb past 2 checkpoints in the Olympic Park just hours before the stadium opens. So this was reported, of course, in the Sun, London Sun, on Sunday. And what type of paper is that? That's a Murdoch, Murder Incorporated paper. A disinformation thing to get setting the stage to say, see, that's how they got it in there. There was weak security, so seemingly a construction man operating a digger had a package that was prepared for by the Sun, and he drove past guards and such. Well, he's an employee of the place, so he's not going to get shook down like maybe other people would, but they say the threat is so severe they're bringing in the Army's explosive search dogs from Afghanistan. Let them kill British soldiers over there, I guess. We have this imaginary Olympic threat, or maybe a real false flag one. I don't know if the dogs are trained to smell nuclear weapons. Then another article as well that just shows you're setting the stage. Heathrow, now an open passage for drugs and arms smugglers as border staff shortages reach crisis point. Well, if you're mobilizing a small army of, tens of thousands of soldiers and police, how come you're short on border guards? Well, obviously because you want to leave a door open to get by. Another reason you can get a door, and I think you can pay £1,500 and get out of the line. Think a terrorist wouldn't be interested in, I don't want to line up with the peasants and get my retina scanned. No, I'll pay the £1,500 and go straight to paradise. David Cameron is worried that his personal text messages to and from Rebecca Brooks may be made public this week. Well, isn't that nice? So I think we have a good reason to show that David Cameron is hook, line, and sinker involved in this plot. So it'd be interesting, can we speculate on what some of them are? You know, Rebecca, did you delete all the messages we left on that dead girl that we killed last week? Or is it stuff like, you know, hey Rebecca, you got a nice ass, come on over. The wife's away this weekend. We can ride the horse. Seemingly he tweeted her on a regular basis about all types of things. And the horse came from the London Metropolitan Police. So one of the other little dots that you have to be very concerned about is in Rupert Murdoch's kingdom, one of the people they hired to be on News Corporation's board was the former Prime Minister of Spain, which means nothing to almost anybody. Except that's where the tip came from, that Maddie McCain was seen with some blonde chick who could have been a Murdoch at the yacht club in Spain. So what do? You give the Prime Minister a job for life, cash for life, buddy. Keep quiet about this. Wallow in the sin pit with me. It'll be okay. Then another really bizarre story is David Cameron had a heartbroken lover when he was younger, working at the Conservative Party headquarters. And believe me, this man was tapped for greatness from childhood. There's none of this, you know, you had to get elected or this or that. He was picked and chosen. He was one of their chosen few. So anyway, this woman, Laura Adshead, ends up joining a convent and becoming Sister John Mary. She was so heartbroken by all this. So that's where she is now, in this convent, after being, you know, the top banana in the Conservative Party with Mr. Cameron. It sounds all very, very weird. Sometimes I wonder if she was a Vatican agent right from the very start and was already employed at that and already trying to get at the Prime Minister to have control of him. Would only make sense. And who is this turkey? Well, while I was doing my research, something very, very surprising came up. This is King William IV, 1837 painting, King of England. And this is a direct descendant, David Cameron. King William, David Cameron. Still a resemblance. Still a resemblance. And of course, good Germans too, because he came from one of the German royal families, and you can have a nice anglicized name all you want, but you follow the wiki link and you find out he's from the House of Hanover. Maybe even he has more right to royalty than the royal family, because at least he was directly descended. But I think there was another woman involved too in the family tree as well with old King William, as you'll read about in there if you look. So Rupert Murdoch now admits the phone hacking cover-up. It's a whole lot easier to admit that than it is to admit murder, espionage, and many, many other things. Treason. Pick something. The genocide of the human race. So here's this article here. I just love this one. Al-Qaeda is a complete fabrication, a made-in-the-USA production. And that's where I saw the little lead for The Power of Nightmares and wanted to get that up there. Top CIA officials openly admit that Al-Qaeda is a total and complete fabrication, having never existed at any time. Al-Qaeda is code for illegal CIA false flag attacks against the United States and other countries. Much of the widespread fear in the post-9/11 world has been fabricated by those in power for their own interests. Fear has been used widely in the media to manipulate the public into giving up civil liberties and turning over power to elite groups and their own hidden agendas. The Power of Nightmares clearly demonstrates that the nightmare vision of a powerful, united terrorist organization waiting to strike our societies is largely an illusion. They paid Jamal al-Fadil hundreds of thousands of dollars to back the government's story of an Al-Qaeda, a group or criminal organization they could legally go after. The people who are fighting to free their country and countrymen of illegal U.S. and NATO invasion and occupations called Al-Qaeda by the U.S. government because the U.S. government needed an enemy. Always need an enemy. It's in the dictator's handbook. The Iraqi, Afghan, and Taliban people are doing exactly as any country would do if attacked and occupied by a foreign state's military. They are resisting. They are freedom fighters. Killing U.S. and NATO soldiers are legal, as their battles against NATO and U.S. forces are ones of self-defense. Actions of the U.S. and NATO are clearly attacks of aggression, war crimes. The U.S., Canadian, NATO countries are terrorists. So as the old saying goes, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. Because if they made all this up, and I believe they have, then these people are just at the butt end of a big boot to remold the world in the image of a way we don't want it remolded, and to take everything we ever have, could have, will have, into the hands of these people. There's a couple of other videos they mention unconstitutional. I'll probably have to look that one up and post it up for your viewing pleasure. Their goal is to one day permanently suspend the United States Constitution after launching another attack against their own country. The U.S. and falsely blame and totally fictitious organization they call Al-Qaeda. They will launch another 9/11 style attack against the U.S., and this time they will declare martial law. The right of habeas corpus to appear before a court and have legal rights will be suspended. This is something that they're working on very, very hard, and all the manifestations of laws in the United States is to get rid of habeas corpus. They mentioned that Al Jazeera is basically the same media organ as CNN. It's paid for by the CIA. They purposely released all these so-called bin Laden videos and tapes to aid the CIA and abet them in destabilizing the United States. This work was done by a studio company in the United States called Allied Media Corporation. The financial trail connects the Bush administration to Allied Media Corporation. It was set up to terrorize the American people. The Bush administration was able to strip American people of their inalienable rights and freedoms because of the video and audio tapes that were made by this Allied Media Group and aired on Al Jazeera. See why you gotta change the channel? I don't do stuff like that in my spare time. Allied Media Group erased its connection with Al Jazeera when George Bush left office. Recently, the Obama administration has started a contract with this company. Allied Media Corporation will be responsible for Al Jazeera programming, and it will be used as a Middle East propaganda tool. They will be marketing themselves under their new name, AMC. Contacted independent news agencies, nbgazette.com, Press Corps' former name, to get independent news agencies to erase any and all reports that connected Allied Media Corporation with Al Jazeera. So you see, they got like a giant vacuum cleaner to suck all the letters off the pages so you can never find anything out. So here we go. All these tapes of bin Laden, they were all fakes, not that we didn't know that at the time. But this is a serious psychological operation that's being waged against us. Part of it, of course, probably one of the few forums to talk about that too, is the fact that all these escaping Nazis came to the Western world, infiltrated us with all these techniques and tactics with Operation Paperclip, paid for by the American taxpayer. Boy, are we stupid, because we don't teach our children anything. I know when I started reading about the intelligence history, I was really getting concerned. So the so-called trial is going on in the military tribunal about the so-called 9/11 terrorists. It's not a trial to me. To me, it's more like a lynch mob. These aren't trials. They're blatantly unfair. The limitations on evidence are just bizarre. There's really not much sense in showing up. Of course, they bring in the useful idiots, the people who think 9/11 was a real thing. They bring in the families of some of the victims and play on their emotions to say, these are the guys who did it. They believe in the lie, the fairy tale. They have absolutely no idea what a false flag operation is. And then we put on this this giant spectacle to have this out. Because basically, yes, it's a shame your family got killed, but just because someone in your family got killed doesn't mean the person they have in the dock is the one who killed them. These people may be just useful idiots too. The whole thing may just be a show trial to take our minds off things and just regurgitate all the material from before. So we still want you to take away more freedoms, more powers from us, more money, turn us into camp justice. There's no justice here, baby. And actually the root word for justice is the Roman goddess Justica. And then this one's just kind of funny. The World Trade Center's being blown up with the sign here. We're making a hard right turn here, baby, going to complete and total fascism, no problem. One of the other little sidebars that we studied from that image is fires are color specific. And the funny thing about that color, that redness and orange that you see in that image, is not characteristic of kerosene or jet fuel. It's more characteristic of napalm. And there's information out on the web that can show you the difference. So that might not even be the jet fuel exploding. It might be something else, where maybe the planes carried napalm as well, because they weren't passenger jets. They didn't have windows. So that's the trouble when we leap to conclusions. Sometimes we leap completely and totally out of the way because we don't understand the big picture. And when you pull back and you see the big picture, you realize you're being deceived. And once we're deceived by a liar, why would we ever trust them to tell the truth? We'd have to be insane. But part of the difficulty of a trial like this is that this will come back. There's always a karma wave. There's a karma wave coming back on the United States for a lot of the things they've done in other countries that are completely and totally unjustified. You will be punished by that wave. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. It's going to come back and haunt you 6 ways from Sunday. Your country will be vanquished because you're refusing to follow God's principles, which aren't raise an army and slaughter everyone. I just don't remember Christ ever doing something like that. It's forgive your enemies, love your enemies, forgive your enemies. Doesn't say jihad, 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 back at you. God will not be mocked. If this is all a fraud and an illusion, America will be punished. You will be punished. It won't be pretty. One of the little codes they use in these articles, of course, is they always pick their numbers. So it says about 60 people representing 30 families were in the theater at Fort Hamilton. 63666. They leave their sign for the gods that they believe in. Make no mistake about it. One of the big allegations, of course, is the torture. One individual, Mohammed, was waterboarded 183 times. You think anybody's not going to confess to anything after being waterboarded 183 times? I'm surprised he lasted that long. Probably after 2 or 3 times, he'd be more willing to say anything to get out of the torture. And one of the little things that just slaps up and bites you, of course, is Mohammed admitted that he personally killed Wall Street reporter Daniel Pearl. And that's a complete falsehood, because we looked into that at the time. We found pictures that people noticed that the chairs that were used in the decapitation video were from Abu Ghraib prison. They were the exact same chairs. And that this was filmed, most likely, in Abu Ghraib prison. And the only way that that Mohammed could have anything to do with that is he would have to be an American agent. That's a lot to say. A lot to say. So one of the other stories that's coming out the track here is the FBI nabs 5 mastermind geniuses teaching them how to blow up a bridge in Cleveland. And these are terrorists, as I frequently extol, Dopey, Smokey, and Yoki, or whatever. All rocket scientists, all. So as the chap from Natural News comments, what did they use to recruit them? A crack pipe? They look like they're dumber than stumps. And then he gets into using a New York Times article that I have here as well. Terrorist plots hatched by the FBI. So even the New York Times and a lot of mainstream media are catching on to the fact that virtually all these plots are FBI plots. One guy took him 11 months of discussion to get him to do the terrorist act, and a promise to pay $250,000 to him to plant fake bombs at 2 Riverdale synagogues. So of the 22 most frightening plans for attacks since 9/11 on American soil, 14 were developed in sting operations. For one of the stings was so severe that it was an FBI agent driving the truck. Other ones involved convicted felons working in exchange for leniency, posing as members of Al-Qaeda groups. Will anybody do that to get out of jail? You want to spend the rest of your life in prison times 50, or you want to get out? Let me think about that for a while. So the people they found were ambivalent, incompetent, and adrift like hapless wannabes looking for a cause. So if you find somebody and talk someone who's mentally retarded or insane into committing a crime, well, yeah, maybe they did commit the crime, but they never would have figured it out if you didn't point them in the right direction, train them, equip them, supply them, and motivate them, or maybe even worse, brainwash them. So then, of course, the big story the last 2 days is, they foiled another plot. So there's another guy got, stained underwear, and he's going to get on a plane and blow something up coming from Yemen, right? So as I'm opening my email, another terrorist plot foiled under Obama. Wow! And then they tell us he was a CIA informant, and also an informant to the Saudi intelligence. So it wasn't a plot. It was another one of those harebrained, we did it scenarios. Because they always do it. It's just the way they are. And that isn't going to change until you change the channel and start making a difference. Because we're really in the soup. What do we got up there for videos, Aaron? We still got the United States one, and then what's the other one?
Mysterious deaths.
The what? Can't hear you.
Mysterious deaths.
Oh yes, the mysterious deaths. Yes, that's what I was thinking of. Brain fart. I'm getting older, so let's roll that one. This is some of the truth about 9/11, about all the mysterious deaths of the people who had inside knowledge who were put to death. People, the useful idiots of the family going to this trial, don't grieve or mourn or don't even realize have been whacked by the same nefarious evil hand. Let's get that one rolling.
I mean, she's already dropped the atomic bomb on them. She's already released the numbers.
Yeah, I have, and not to be concerned. I have no intention of letting anyone buy me off or make any kind of a deal with me.
And you're not planning to commit suicide.
And I'm not planning to commit suicide either.
The fact that you're so visible really protects you going on Larry King and other big shows. But you want to put it on record that you're not planning to commit suicide?
No, I'm not planning to commit suicide. I'm planning to go into court on April 7th if indeed we do have the trial, and I plan on defending myself vigorously, and I plan on exposing the government in ways that, I do not think they want me to expose them.
From law enforcement about their investigation into the D.C. madam.
When she went outside, she noticed the three-wheel bicycle had been moved that was normally kept in the shed. Upon entering the shed located on the west side of the residence, Blanche Palfrey discovered her daughter, Deborah, had apparently hung herself using a nylon rope from a metal beam on the ceiling of the shed. She then called 911. At approximately 11:01 a.m., Tarpon Springs Fire Rescue had pronounced Deborah Jean Palfrey deceased.
So all these people as well have received the ultimate retirement policy for standing up for truth and justice in the American way. And it's just absolutely abhorrent that they get away with these crimes over and over and over again. Well, pretty much nothing happens. Then while I was working on the Queen Mother story, I was quite surprised to find some very revealing information from when I was much younger that just pretty much puts the proof of the pudding on the table. But in this little thing, Mum's the Word, to make a play on Mum's the Word on keeping a secret, we found a lot of history about the Queen Mother. In a new book that's coming out, The Untold Life of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, there are many reasons why Mum is the Word. The author, Lady Colin Campbell, explains that Queen Elizabeth was conceived by artificial insemination by King George. But that's not the real shocker. To me, the real shocker was she was born in a liaison between the father, Claude George Bowes Lyon, the 14th Earl of Strathmore, and King Horn, and a French cook, Marguerite Rogier, French chef at St. Paul, Waldenbury, where the Queen Mother was alleged to have been born in 1900. And of course, her middle name, Elizabeth Angela Marguerite, Bowes lion incorporates her mother's name as well. This was supposed to be a common practice in the old days because of high mortality rates between mothers and children and such like that. But of course they altered the birth certificate to make it look like the Earl's real wife, Cecilia, was the mother and covered it up. And also another child was a son that was born after that. So the plot thickens because Elizabeth is betrothed to Prince Albert, the Duke of York. That's King George VI. And what should have been, a relatively easy life. Marry the prince, live happily ever after. Doesn't work out that way. Because it was Albert, who later became King Edward, who was heir to the throne. He ascended to the throne in January 1936. And his sister-in-law Elizabeth conspired ruthlessly to oust Edward as King of England, and she succeeded. She worked, according to this article from The Madness of King Edward VIII in the Daily Mail, which we link on our website, with the Archbishop Cosmo Gordon Lang. I guess there's a picture of Queenie after she gets the spoils. She gets her man, which she didn't want because, of course, the children were artificially inseminated. George died very early in 1952 from cancer and complications. Maybe some of those complications were aided and abetted by his wife, who the author of the book says didn't do sex with her husband. So obviously that's not a love relationship. It's a quest for power. She got the power. She knew where she was from. Edward knew where she was from too. In the public, he always called her Cookie to embarrass her about her mother not being a member of the royal family or a royal family. So in a way to verify or get the seed they need, of course they had to find another royal type family or family in line to the throne, the Spencer family, to get the eggs from Diana to finally seal the fate with William that he comes from two lines. One may not have been pure, but the other one is. So he is most eligible to hold the throne. So Queen Elizabeth, at that time wasn't queen, but to get to be queen, she used this Cosmo Gordon Lang as an agent to create pressure to get the king to abdicate. So he worked with the editor of the Times, the London Times, Geoffrey Dawson. So it's almost got like we got the Murdoch thing all over again. See, if you don't learn from history, you're condemned to repeat it. Of course, they never taught us this in history. We heard some of the fake stories about the king and the vilification of Wallace Simpson. That's what the media was supposed to do, to make up all kinds of stories about her so that she would be completely unpopular. So they threatened to ruin the king in the media unless he resigned. So they must have had something even better on him than that, because he resigned. Then of course George becomes king and Elizabeth is ceremonially the queen, but as the wife she does inherit probably a significant amount of property. And then of course when King George dies, her daughter Elizabeth takes over. There's letters attached to the website that go back and forth to talk about these arrangements and the smoking gun that were in the Daily Mail article. So we can see that this isn't coming out of someone's hat. So we wonder about many things. And then as I'm doing research on this too, I find out about Princess Margaret. She died at a young age, considering how long the Queen Mother lasted and how long Elizabeth is lasting at a young 71. And then I was quite young when some of these things were going on, but I was just wondering how she got injured so severely. She was supposed to have been burned in a bathing accident with scalding hot water. Now, normally you boil a lobster, but you don't boil it yourself. I know some people who like a hot tub and all that sort of thing, but not enough to take the skin off. So this poor woman was burned so severely that she was crippled for the rest of her life, that she couldn't walk and had to be in a wheelchair frequently. Those are horrendous burns. And when you're getting into a tub that's full of like boiling, scalding hot water, like it's going to be like a Roman steam bath in there. The air above the water is going to be significantly hot. You're going to be able to breathe it in, feel it, sense it, smell it, that's boiling water. So we have to wonder, was she tortured or abused in some way? There was a very adversarial relationship since childhood between Margaret and her sister Elizabeth. Terrible sibling rivalry. They fought like cats and dogs frequently. Or maybe two cats. And then one of the little anecdotes is that Princess Margaret was involved in a bank robbery. Well, that's got to attract your attention. A bank robbery? She hold the place up? No. She was the victim in a bank robbery. But this is the 1971 Baker Street robbery. It's one of the most famous robberies in Britain. Subject of a very popular movie called The Bank Job. And I'll probably have to find that one somewhere and watch it. That sounds very, very interesting. So what happened is these robbers tunneled into the bank and they opened the safety deposit boxes of some very, very prominent people. And this is where I've got to have the luck of the Irish. I wish I could pick lotto numbers like this. Because the government introduced what's called a D notice to bring in national security so that no one can ever talk about this, publish it in a public forum or anything like that. And it was concealed. The names of the robbers when they were caught were never released. They were locked up for a long time and suitably forgotten. It was revealed that the intelligence services were actively involved in this robbery. Many police commanders were punished severely as a result of this robbery. And the cover story put out was that the robbers acquired nude pictures or revealing pictures of Princess Margaret, and that's why all this came into place. So lo and behold, while I'm searching for information, I come across a Daily Mirror article where one of the robbers, now out of prison in 2007, talks about what he found or what they found in these vaults. And they weren't nude pictures of the princess. They found these safety deposit boxes filled with kiddie porn of such a disgusting nature that the robbers dropped the safety deposit boxes on the floor and refused to touch them or pick them up. They just figured they'd leave them there for the police to find and vamonosed out of the bank. One of the boxes belonged to Quintin Hogg, the Lord Chancellor. Of course, one of them belonged to Princess Margaret. We wonder if she had documents attesting to maybe some of the rather less flattering aspects of royal family history in that box, and that this box had been exposed to public view by these villains. Another man who's supposed to have had a box was the British equivalent of Malcolm X, Michael X, who was ultimately hanged for murder in Trinidad and Tobago thereafter. But a man who was so important at the time that John Lennon actually bailed him out of jail, and John and Yoko sold locks of their hair to support him through his times of difficulty. It's too bad they're still not alive. We could sell their hair here at that channel. So the records on Michael X are sealed until 2054 as a result of national security. And if anybody's still alive in 2054 with any knowledge of what happened in 1971, we'll be doing okay to remember to ask. And that's why they do this stuff. They conceal this information for so long so that by the time it is released, no one's going to really care. And then it's all by the wayside. And if we can show a quick picture of Princess Margaret in her younger years. This was taken by her husband, Lord Snowdon, so I guess she was quite the dish, and that's why we had to have the D notice on her, because we wouldn't want to see her fanny somewhere. But just absolutely bizarre, the depth and breadth of this story. And then we kind of unraveled things outside of my order a little bit, but they did make an arrest in the BP oil spill. One individual, former engineer, Kurt Mix of Caddy, Texas, has been arrested for destroying evidence because he deleted more than 300 text messages that shows it was all lies and crap about this event. That they misled the public, they misled law enforcement, they misled everybody, and I guess he's the fall guy. Maybe they didn't want to kill him because he was a nice guy, I don't know. Obama's kicking off his election. So this is the picture here that you're not supposed to see. The place is empty. Like even in the article, they start talking about, well, you know, he had 14,000 out of a possible 20,000. Like, you know, do the math, people. The whole upper tier here is empty. And this one here, okay, maybe you got 60% of the people in the lower tier and a few on the floor, Then, of course, the pundits do a little shifting around and get everybody to move down closer to the stage or all that kind of stuff to show we have some people. Turn out the lights in the upper tier so you don't see anybody up there. But he wasn't doing too good. Well, his wife turned up. That's a good sign, I guess. And then he knows what to say right there. Forward. Thought it was change. Oh, no, that was the last time. That was Hitler's slogan, change. Now we're going forward. Forward off the cliff. So Obama signed the International Criminal Court Agreement, which may be a good thing because maybe we can round up some of these criminals from the Bush administration. Ashcroft, Gonzalez, maybe McCain, Lieberman, Cheney. There's one who needs to be waterboarded a few times. That would be nice. And then some people have found Obama's document from Occidental College or something like that. That could be very beneficial, that he did apply for a student loan as Barry Soetoro. So here's this man who's constantly lied, cheated, and manipulated. Oh, I got to open this up here. Just give me a minute here. There we go. I think that's what it looks like. So he signs it, Barry Soetoro. He gets a student loan, which was only to be for foreign students, and that's okay because it's all American taxpayer money. That's you. You got suckered. Then, of course, Barry Soetoro, our CIA president or whatever he is working overtime. He is going to bring in the North American Union. He passes more executive orders, or I guess you don't pass one, you just sign one, right? Because you're ruling by fiat. And he brings this up so that America can be jived with Canada and Mexico into a North American Union. And this is just unbelievable on how they do this. These globalists are the worst traitors. Business Week at least covered this article. They're going to strengthen international institutions as the UN, the IMF, the World Bank, the WTO. Signed a new international economic agreements. All nations must come together, quote unquote, to build a stronger global regime. Well, see, a regime usually isn't a good thing. It usually means it's a bad thing. That's not a good word. You got to go back to the PR people for that one. The United States of America will be merged into a global system. His new executive order, and they bring in some of these buzzwords. This is one of their most important buzzwords. It harmonizes U.S. economic regulations with the rest of the world. Well, part of those harmonizings could be no minimum wage, no health benefits, living in a total crap hole, complete no health and safety, you know, maybe firing squads. That could be harmonizing. It's a buzzword. People fall for it. To bring in this one world economic system. Diverse regulations can cause trouble for companies doing business across national boundaries. Unnecessary differences in countries, regulatory requirements can cost money, compromising economic growth and job creation. Think of divergent requirements for car headlights, the labeling of food, whether it's GMO or not, maybe, poison or not, standards for container sizes. So they mention that America has to compete. And the only reason America has to compete is, see, before it never had to compete. And you know why? Because America was the leader of the pack. America was the land of milk and honey. America was numero uno in the global economy, bar none. You'd probably have to put a whole bunch of the rest together to come to a close second. You lived very, very well. You could drive big-ass cars made by your own people with your own resources, steam along Route 66 at high speed, making tons of greenhouse gases and tons of green to put in your pocket. So they come up with other buzzwords too, like streamline, promote. They really don't do anything for you. The biggest buzzwords out of it should be like, screw you. That's our buzzword to go back to them. Screw you. We don't want this. The strong push towards North American integration to shape into a regional economic unit like the EU for efficiency. Now look at the EU. Millions of convoluted rules, a bureaucratic nightmare, doomed to failure. What part can't they catch on? So they talk about it took 50 years to build the European Union. It's just like a slow step-by-step process. But when it comes apart, it'll come apart in an afternoon. Just like that. Because it defies many laws in economics, like the economy of scale. So you build it up too high, it gets top heavy, it's just going to, it could take you 1,000 years to build it. It could still fall over in an afternoon. Just like that. And it's serve them right. The big thing about it, and the most important thing about it, is it's the Antichrist system. And that's something they don't want you to know. That's one of the reasons why they take the Bible out of public school education. It's very important for them to do that kind of stuff. Canada's doing the same thing. Canada's got into free trade agreements with, I just got this big long list. They had a nice picture. I don't have it front and center on me, I don't think so. That's too bad. Where they have all the nice little flags with the maple leaf in the middle, but it's the same thing. It's the spiral to the bottom, the way to destroy the whole shooting match. It eliminates the middle class. In this article, say 95% of the jobs lost during the recession were middle class jobs. Like, that's you and me. 95%. It's like almost all of them. Wages dropping, benefits dropping, even if you get a job. And when you get a replacement job, it's a menial minimum wage type of thing. Like I've said many, many times before. It's like, go into the richest part of town and say, hey, I'll give you my shit box for your, whatever you got, your Rolls Royce, your Bentley. Car, right? Car's a car. Job's a job. You took my job, you let me work at McDonald's, so I'm taking your car and you can have my shit box. The race goes to the swift. The big reason, there was another big article, I had like 25 reasons why we're losing out, is because nobody's thinking, nobody's reading. The race goes to the swift. Two of the biggest sins we've had for our children are to have video games and these headphones where you tune out. You can't even listen to your parents talk because you know it all, right? You got your music going into your head. And then you listen, or don't get to listen, to all the conversations from the generations that gone before to learn all the tricks that are going to be waiting for you in your life. And then you get suckered into a system by these crooks, and you deprive yourself of education forever because you broke the communication barrier. Brilliant for them, stupid for you, but the race goes to the swift. Then, of course, to add insult to injury, a Spanish company will count American votes overseas in November. CEO Per Valles, who donated heavily to the 2008 Obama campaign, lived in Chicago and has known Obama for a long time. He owns the Spanish company, SCYTL, that's going to count the votes. So what does that tell you? The fix is in. And then Ron Paul beat Romney in his own state. And of course mainstream media kind of sloughs this off, but he's done well enough that he can get on the ballot regardless. And that means if it hits the fan, when it hits the fans, Ron Paul can be the solution or the answer. So here's some of the history. If people let government decide what foods they eat and what medicines they take, their bodies will soon be in a sorry state as the souls of those who live under tyranny. Thomas Jefferson. Some kids in Brampton fighting, being forced to eat what the state decides you eat, although they want to eat junk food as opposed to what the state wants to give them, but good for them. It's your choice. Right or wrong, it's your choice. If we are not even free anymore to decide something as basic as what we wish to eat or drink, how much freedom do we really have left? Ron Paul. Who else can you vote for? There is no other choice. It's Ron Paul or nothing. That's one of the big reasons why, as part of the North American Union, the globalization process is coming. Canada's been on the front page a lot for the getting rid of the gun registry or whatever. They have to know where the guns are because they're doing the same old trick Hitler did. First we disarm you, We take you for a train ride. It's the same old thing. They have to know. So even though, it's like I've told a lot of people that are going for the conservatives and such, this is a red herring. It's a complete red herring. Yes, they're getting rid of the gun registry. They're getting rid of, they got 2 sets of books. They're going to burn one, but they still got the other one. So they're still doing a de facto gun registry in Quebec. They're using the original McCoy in Ontario. They're just keeping all the data. They're forcing all the store owners to inventory all the owners and keep all the files, because it is fundamental in establishing the New World Order that it's a complete and total tyranny, a complete and total police state, a complete and total fraud built to guzzle all the money and enslave all the people. And one of my favorite people, our Deputy Defense Minister, or Associate Defense Minister, Julian Fantino, has been cleared by the Federal Ethics Commissioner about offshore accounts he is supposed to have had in the Cayman Islands. Of course, this is supposed to be with UBS Wealth Management. Guess he couldn't send it to Switzerland. He likes it sunny, but in their branch, I guess, in the Cayman Islands. So it's alleged that these documents were frauds based on complaints from a former candidate, conservative candidate in the riding he finagled and took over, Richard Lorello, who's pointing out just a wealth of inadequacies in this election. There's a lot of infighting going on there. I wrote this gentleman, hopefully he gets his email on this, because we talked about Julian Fantino and offshore accounts and the alleged superstars connection. Because one of the reasons they're bringing in police executives to go into high places in government is because they're the best people to launder money if you have to launder money, because they know how to do it and not get caught. So there's a classic book out called The Merger about how organized crime has infiltrated the boardrooms, political boardrooms, corporate boardrooms, and just like in the old gangster movies that come in, we're taking over. You don't like it? Pop. Next. We're taking over. You like it? Okay, he likes it. So what the police forces did to go after drug laundering money was set up their own bank, completely outside of the banking industry, and launder money. So there's no records kept, no reporting required, because it's an intelligence operation. It's not a bank, but it has been set up as a bank to move money anywhere they want. This is done on a very limited need-to-know basis. So if you even had 10 or 20 people that knew about some of these operations, that would probably be too many. But of course, some of the people who would know would be the commissioners and senior law enforcement officers and some of these organized crime swindles. And they didn't keep records. So yes, maybe they would have a record of a certain gangster they arrested for laundering money from evidence they collected in this bank that they induced gangsters to put money in. But they could have laundered tons of other money that no one would ever know about. And there may be other financial institutions working at this right now as we speak in giant sting operations. But they only grab a few, and the rest of the money nobody asks about. There's no requirement to report or record anything. It just goes. And then one of the other factors that's involved is the merger also gets into the bank boardrooms too, where various gangsters in the banking industry are participating in this process. So if you have an account offshore and I get the goods on it and I start to shine a light on that account, well, the account is deleted. It disappears. All records disappear, and the money's transferred to either another institution or another account in the same institution with a new number. And no one ever finds out. They can't, because you'd actually have to be monitoring the crook or Fantino to actually catch the transfers, or to him having possession, like you exercised the search warrant and you got the account numbers from the inside as opposed from a complaint coming from the outside, because they can change those accounts in a heartbeat, and I believe they're doing that at the highest levels. Had an accidental run-in once with a guy who was the commissioner of the RCMP. See, the trouble with me is I know too much. So even though you don't tell me anything and you don't want to say anything, just by talking to me, I'm already got my dots. This one goes here, that one goes there, this one goes here, this one goes there. I know who you are, I know where you've been, and I know what you can do. So why are you taking that plane to where? To do what? And you get autographed pictures of the Prime Minister for what? You smell it. I've been at it too long. I'm a tradesman in that sort of thing. You can smell the crime. It takes you a while to prove it, but you can smell it. But see, that's why we're a radio show. We don't necessarily have to prove it. We can ask questions, make inquiries, and come up with the best answer we can. And that's sometimes all we can do. And sometimes that's enough. Because then the crooks have to scurry away and come up with something better. And maybe Mr. Lorello will get lucky and really find one of those offshore accounts. Fantino says someone stole his identity. There's a loser, stealing the former commissioner of the OPP's identity and opening up an account to launder money in. What a nasty boy you would have been. Stupid. It's a terrible thing to do. But someone stole our country too. Many of our countries, all our countries. We got a last video, let's throw that up, about the 3 cities. They've stolen all our countries. The 3 cities, Washington, the City of London, and the Vatican. They own it all.
Did the world wars, revolutions, and big events of human history evolve naturally, or were they calculated and pre-planned? If they were pre-planned, who planned them, and what are they planning for the future of humanity? The answer to this puzzling question can be found within the boundaries of 3 of the world's most powerful cities. Those 3 cities belong to no nation and pay no taxes. They are Washington's District of Columbia, which is not part of the city of Washington or of the United States, the inner city of London, which is not part of London or England, and Vatican City, which is not part of Rome or Italy. These cities, called city-states, have their own independent flag, their own separate laws, and their own separate identity.
The city is in fact a state, the smallest principality in the world. It lies on the banks of the Tiber, completely surrounded by the city of Rome. Its status as a separate state emerged from the Lateran Agreements of February 1929. It has its own newspaper, postal service, radio and television station, its own flag, and a population of about 1,000.
The colossal wealth of the Vatican includes enormous investments with the Rothschilds in Britain, France, and the USA, and with giant oil and weapons corporations like Shell and General Electric. The Vatican solid gold bullion worth billions is stored with the Rothschild-controlled Bank of England and the U.S. Federal Reserve Bank. The Catholic Church is the biggest financial power, wealth accumulator, and property owner in existence, possessing more material wealth than any bank, corporation, giant trust, or government anywhere on the globe. City, London's inner city, is also a privately owned corporation or city-state, located right smack in the heart of Greater London. It became a sovereign state in 1694 when King William III of Orange privatized and turned the Bank of England over to the bankers. By 1812, Nathan Rothschild crashed the English stock market and scammed control of the Bank of England. Today, the city-state of London is the world's financial power center and the wealthiest square mile on the face of the earth. It houses the Rothschild-controlled Bank of England, Lloyd's of London, the London Stock Exchange, all British banks, the branch offices of 385 foreign banks, and 70 U.S. banks. It has its own courts, its own laws, its own flag, and its own police force. It's not part of Greater London or England or the British Commonwealth and pays no taxes. The city-state of London houses Fleet Street's newspaper and publishing monopolies. It is also the headquarters for worldwide English Freemasonry and headquarters for the worldwide money cartel known as the Crown. Contrary to popular belief, the Crown is not the royal family or the British monarch. The Crown is the private corporate city-state of London. It has a council of 12 members who rule the corporation under a mayor called the Lord Mayor. The Lord Mayor and his 12-member council serve as proxies or representatives who sit in for 13 of the world's wealthiest, most powerful banking families. This ring of 13 ruling families includes the Rothschild family, the Warburg family, the Oppenheimer family, and the Schiff family. These families and their descendants run the Crown Corporation of London. The Crown Corporation holds the title to worldwide Crown land in Crown colonies like Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. The British Parliament and the British Prime Minister serve as a public front for the hidden power of these ruling Crown families. Like the city-state of London and the Vatican, a third city-state was officially created in 1982. That city-state is called the District of Columbia and is located on 10 square miles of land in the heart of Washington. The District of Columbia flies its own flag and has its own independent constitution. Although geographically separate, the city-states of London, the Vatican, and the District of Columbia are one interlocking empire called Empire of the City. The flag of Washington's District of Columbia has 3 red stars, one for each city-state in the 3-city empire. This corporate empire of 3 city-states controls the world economically through London's inner city, militarily through the District of Columbia, and spiritually through the Vatican. The Constitution for the District of Columbia operates under a tyrannical Roman law known as Lex Fori, which bears no resemblance to the U.S. Constitution. When Congress passed the Act of 1871, it created a separate corporate government for the District of Columbia. This treasonous act allowed the District of Columbia to operate as a corporation outside the original Constitution of the United States and outside of the best interests of American citizens. A sobering study of the signed treaties and charters between Britain and the United States exposes a shocking truth. The United States has always been, and still is, a British Crown colony. King James I was famous not for just changing the Bible into the King James Version, but for signing the first Charter of Virginia in 1606. That charter granted America's British forefathers a license to settle and colonize America. The charter also guaranteed that future kings and queens of England would have sovereign authority over all the citizens and colonized land in America stolen from the Indians. After America declared its independence from Great Britain, the Treaty of 1783 was signed. That treaty specifically identifies the King of England as the Prince of the United States and contradicts the belief that America won the War of Independence. Although King George III of England gave up most of his claims over his American colonies, he kept his right to continue receiving payment for his business venture of colonizing America. If America had really won the War of Independence, they would never have agreed to pay debts and reparations to the King of England. When Congress passed the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, the U.S. President was made subservient to the King of England. The 13th Amendment is called the Title of Nobility Amendment and forbids U.S. presidents and their officials from using royal titles like King or Prince or Baron. For some mysterious reason, the 13th Amendment, which was ratified in 1810, no longer appears on current copies of the Constitution. America's blood-soaked War of Independence against the British bankrupted America and turned its citizens into permanent debt slaves of the King. In the War of 1812, the British torched and burned to the ground the White House and all U.S. government buildings and destroyed ratification records of the U.S. Constitution. 1 century later, a corrupt U.S. Congress committed the biggest theft in world history. They passed Paul Warburg's Federal Reserve Act in 1913, handing over America's gold and silver reserves and total control of America's economy to the Rothschild banksters. Most Americans still believe that the Fed, or Federal Reserve, is the government. It is not. The Fed is a privately owned banking system whose majority Class A shareholders are the Rothschilds, Warburgs, Kuhn & Loeb, J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, Israel Seif, and the Lehman Brothers. This private banking cartel is the Fed and is never audited and never pays taxes. They print and design America's money, which displays their symbols of an Egyptian pyramid, a Masonic all-seeing eye, and the words "In God We Trust." Who exactly is the God they trust? They also collect American taxpayers' money through the IRS. Then they loan it back again with interest to pay for roads, bridges, and other public works. American presidents are handpicked and financed by these special interest power groups. The Forbes part of John Kerry's name identifies his descendancy from Captain Robert Bennett Forbes, who was a drug runner for the Rothschilds' opium drug trade with China in the 1800s. Most U.S. citizens believe that the United States is a country and that the President is the most powerful man on earth. The United States is not a country. It is a corporation, and the President is President of the Corporation of the United States. He and his elected officials work for the corporation, not for the American people. Since the United States is a corporation, who owns the corporation of the United States? Like Canada and Australia, whose leaders are prime ministers of the Queen and whose land is called Crown Land, the United States is just another crown colony. Crown colonies are controlled by the empire of 3 city-states. At the center of each city-state is a towering, phallic-shaped stone monument called an obelisk that points skyward. Obelisks are phallic-shaped monuments honoring the pagan sun god of ancient Egypt called Amun-Ra. The spirit of this pagan god is said to reside within the obelisk. Obelisks symbolize the phallus and fertility. At the base of the obelisk is a sun-wheel circle symbolizing the vagina. Together, they depict male and female sexual union. Worshippers of Amun believe Amun is the supreme god and creator of all things and can transform himself into other gods like Osiris, the god of the underworld, or Seth, the god of evil and chaos.
So I bet you didn't learn that in your high school civics class. That's the way the world really runs. And that's why we got to change it. That's why you come to Conspiracy Cafe. Another one of those articles I saw in my emails is an unidentified gunman shot the chief executive of the Italian nuclear engineering company, Ansaldo Nucleare, owned by an Italian defense conglomerate. So it appears the war is still on, things are still happening. And that's why you got to come to Conspiracy Cafe, only here on that channel in downtown Toronto. We say it like it is, we don't care. You may want to say Amen Ra in your prayers, but I wouldn't recommend it if I were you. You can just see who they're working for. They're not working for the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They're not working for Christ. They're not working for the Holy Spirit. The Holy Trinity means nothing to them. They've prostituted the whole world. They're going to destroy it or take it over at their leisure for profit. And the people, we the people, mean nothing. You have to change that. Change the channel. We'll be here next week, Thursday. Don't miss it. Good night.